I would like you to take a moment to reflect on what you think was the best level in Doom 2016. Now, why was it the best level exactly? Is it because of the battles with the well thought out enemy placement, allowing for some very intense fights? Or maybe perhaps it's the level design and exploration and secrets? Now, if we're talking strictly about battles, my personal favorite would have to be the final level, Argent Denure, which delivers non-stop action from start to finish. But that's a story for another video. For this video, as you can already tell, I want to particularly focus on level design. Now, picking a level with the best level design in Doom 2016 is kind of problematic since most of the earlier levels have some very non-linear designs. However, the general consensus I've seen among many fans, along with my own opinion as well, is that Level 3, the Foundry, shines above the rest, and here is why. There are generally three core principles that I look for when I'm looking at level design in any single player game, really. Now, as I just stated, these are mostly targeted towards single player games, and not multiplayer. Now, of course, this is all subjective and based on my personal opinion. If you don't agree with something, then that's perfectly fine. Moving on, let's start off with the first core principle. Number 1, the level is consistent. So what exactly do I mean by consistency? Well, consistency comes in many different ways when we're discussing map design in particular. For example, you would want the map to be consistent with what it's trying to go for, what it's trying to be. So in the Foundry's case, as the name suggests, it's supposed to be a foundry. Now, when I played this map for the first time, I wasn't quite sure what a foundry is, or the exact definition of it, but I had a general idea it's sort of like a factory of some sort. So having this knowledge prior to going into the level, it actually helped with the immersion a lot. It really does give the level a sense of place and significantly adds to the atmosphere as well. To add to that, the level is actually very coherent and consistent in terms of map layout. Every room actually fits in with each other and there's nothing that's out of place or surprising. It feels as though each room serves a purpose of sorts, and that this actually was a foundry or a factory at some point. That is, until the demons came around. So moving on to the second core principle. Number 2, the level is interconnected. Now this one is a little more self-explanatory in comparison to the last one. Interconnected usually means that no matter which path the player takes, it'll always lead back to some sort of central area or a hub of some sort. Now this hub connects to multiple different paths that branch out from the center. This allows for more player freedom because a player is free to explore in any order they wish and they can go to any one of these rooms or paths. So now that we know that information, let's take a look at the map of the Foundry. I've highlighted the red area as a central hub area of this map. The rest of the rooms highlighted in yellow are the branching paths that branch out from the central area. These rooms highlighted in yellow can be explored in any order the player wishes, allowing for a lot of player freedom as I previously mentioned. Alright, cool, so the Foundry is interconnected and it has multiple different paths that lead back to the central area. Cool, so what does that have to do with the objectives? Well, I'm glad you asked. First of all, the Foundry presents 4 different objectives. All these objectives are spread across the map and they require the player to actually explore and to find these objectives on their own. There's no hand-holding whatsoever. This is a complete opposite of earlier maps in Doom 2016, for example the UAC, which presents a fairly straightforward path from start to finish. In addition to all that, there are 2 keys in this level which technically act as side objectives. Not to mention they can be collected in any order the player wishes, allowing for a lot of freedom. Although some people may argue the blue key is a little bit more tricky to get, especially for the average player since it requires a little bit of thinking outside the box. Nonetheless, it is completely doable on your first playthrough. In fact, there's an entire YouTube video dedicated to the different ways you can collect the blue key. I believe there's up to 5 or 6 different paths you can take. One very important factor that I would like to mention that Foundry applies to the level design is the fact that there are no cutoff points whatsoever. When I say cutoff points, I'm referring to points of no return. Now this is a common trope seen in many modern games where once you cross a certain line, you won't be able to go back to the start. This is pretty crucial as it does limit player creativity and freedom. I mean, imagine going through the first half of the level and getting to the second half and finally realizing that you missed a secret or some goodies back in the first half. And when you try to go back, the game basically gives you a middle finger and tells you to screw yourself, thus requiring you to restart the entire level from scratch. This, in my opinion, is pretty bad game design in general. Now thankfully, the Foundry does not commit this sin. You can go back to any room that you have already previously visited. Even by the end of the level, you can go back to the entire map and explore it all over again if you wanted to. Finally, the third core principle. Number 3. The level is complementary. So the level design being good is one part of it. However, what's a level if there are no enemies to kill and no fun battles or encounters? Which brings me to my next point. The enemy encounters, the enemy placement, and the enemy variety must complement the level design. So in the Foundry's case, we have 5 different enemy types that appear in this level. The Hell Knight, the Soldier, the Hellraiser, the Possessed, and finally the Imps. As you can tell, there is only one heavy unit, which is the Hell Knight, and I believe in the Foundry's case this works out, because I believe that if there was another heavy unit, such as the Cacodemon for example, there would be a lot less space to maneuver and the level would have felt a little more congested, if you know what I mean. So as you can tell, throughout this level you'll mostly be dealing with lower tier demons. Once in a while the game will throw a Hell Knight at you just to change things up, and that actually works pretty well and keeps it from getting repetitive. Now during these intense encounters is where the level design really shines, as it grants you a lot of verticality and maneuverability options and ways to avoid the enemy. This makes it so these arenas are actually very fun to traverse, thus maintaining that player engagement. Honestly, this point however applies to the entire game, as every single arena throughout the entire game is very well thought out and well designed. However, one thing I really want to point out that I really liked in the Foundry is the enemy placement, especially for the Hell Knights. This level uses the Hell Knights very sparingly in order to get a reaction out of the player. I really love this as it is pretty unpredictable and Hell Knights actually just randomly appear throughout the level as you progress. Alright, now to address the elephant in the room. If you made it this far into the video, you've probably been wondering to yourself that although yes, the Foundry does cover these 3 core principles of good level design, there are other levels in this game that do it as well. Well, first, I'll start off by saying that I can say with full certainty that not every single level in Doom 2016 applies all 3 core principles. In fact, there are only 2 maps that apply all 3 of these, and that includes the Foundry. So there is only one other map that can battle the Foundry on even grounds, but I will be getting to that in a second. First of all, let's start off with the comparisons. Just by looking at the 2 maps, you can clearly see who has the upper hand here. The UAC presents a very straightforward linear experience from start to finish. Essentially, you're following a straight line to the objective, and there's only one objective in this map, which is at the end, so there's not really any player choice because there's no choices to make in the first place. You just follow this one path to the objective, and that's basically it. This already contradicts one of the 3 core principles of good map design, so we're gonna leave it at that and move on to the second level, which is resource operations. Now, this one's a little bit more tricky because when you actually look at these 2 maps side by side, they look really similar. So it's kind of tricky to tell which one is linear and which one is not. But contrary to that, resource operations is actually pretty damn linear. The map is basically broken up into different segments. So you start off from traveling to point A to point B, and then there's a room with a bunch of demons. You kill all the demons, then once again you're traveling from point A to B, then there's another room of demons, and yeah, you get where this is going. So all in all, resource operations is a pretty linear experience, although the map itself is presented in a non-linear fashion. So that already contradicts one of the 3 core principles, so we're going to be moving on to level 5. Now you're probably wondering what happened to level 4. Now level 4 is a special case, and I want to get back to that later on to discuss it more thoroughly. So for now, let's move on to level 5, Argent Energy Tower. This level starts off pretty damn strong, especially this bridge part, which has different ways of approaching it. When you climb to the top of the bridge as well, there's an entirely optional area that houses a weapon upgrade drone. And when I say it's optional, I truly mean that you can completely skip this area on your first playthrough and just go straight to the objective. However, you are rewarded if you explore it, of course, but like I said, that adds to the non-linearity. The game simply presents you 2 paths and you can choose one or the other, and it grants the player that freedom to be able to choose. Unfortunately, the level falls short after this small segment here, as the objective primarily becomes climbing the tower, and there's only really one path you can take to get to that objective. So once again, the level design boils down to fighting a bunch of monsters and then traveling from point A to B, then more monsters, etc, etc. Now honestly, there's no real point in me going any further from this point onwards. The levels just keep getting more and more linear as you progress through the campaign, especially after Kattinger's Sanctum. So I'm going to take this opportunity to go back to level 4, which is Argent Facility. Now this is the actual map that comes close to toppling the Foundry, and some people may even find the Argent Facility a better map than the Foundry. However, I'm here to explain why the Foundry is better. So let's talk about Argent Facility. Now, like the previous maps, this one actually has all 3 core principles. In fact, I actually had some difficulty deciding if this map is better than the Foundry or if the Foundry is actually better. However, in the end, I did decide that the Foundry is better, and there's a couple of reasons why, which I'm going to discuss here. The Argent Facility presents 4 main objectives, which are destroying the filters. Unlike the Foundry though, it does not have any keys or any side objectives of any sort. So you can basically go directly to these filters and destroy them. After you destroy the 4th filter, that basically triggers the end of the level, and that's about it. Now in comparison, the Foundry actually has 4 main objectives, which I already mentioned earlier, and there's also key cards thrown into the mix. Another thing I forgot to mention earlier is that there is the small segment in the Foundry where you have to collect the security officer's arm in order to proceed further into the level. Now this is what I call a creative way to obstruct the player from getting to their objective. I mean, if the developers wanted to, they could have easily just made you fight a bunch of demons and then unlock the door after you kill the demons. However, the Argent Facility actually does this. You have to kill a bunch of demons, then after you kill them, you destroy the filters, then after you destroy the filters, lo and behold, more demons spawn in, and then you gotta kill those demons because the doors lock once again. So this formula basically repeats for each of the filters that you destroy, and it gets a little repetitive. I mean, it is fun of course, but there's nothing to change up the pace. So the next thing I want to talk about, I already touched up earlier in the video, and that's the enemy placement in the Foundry. Especially the Hell Knights and how well thought out their placement is. You can tell that the map designer is actually kind of trying to mess with you and catch you off guard. Unfortunately, there is nothing like that to be seen in the Argent Facility. Most of the enemies that you fight are in large arenas after you've destroyed the Gore Nest. Finally, the last point I want to touch up on, which may be the most important, is the objective placement in Argent Facility. I felt the objectives just felt a little too close to each other. The filters were not that far apart. In fact, 2 filters are basically in the same building, one is on the 1st floor and one is on the 2nd floor. I feel the objectives could have been spaced out a bit more to encourage map exploration. If you're just playing for objectives and don't really explore the level, you can basically miss about 70% of the map and beat the map within little to no time. I find it funny because the level itself is actually pretty big and there's a large outside area as well, unlike the Foundry, which takes place in closed corridors and mostly inside. However, I felt the objectives in the Foundry were much more further apart and they supported exploration more and actually made the player go out there and find the objectives. All in all, both maps are very solid, and I wouldn't really shame anyone for picking one over the other, as they are both well crafted. However, when it comes to the best map design, the Foundry is the clear winner in Doom 2016. And with that, this wraps up my video analysis on the Foundry and why I think it's the best level in Doom. Now before I close off the video, I do want to mention the Super Gore Nest from Doom Eternal. The reason why is because it's in a similar case as the Foundry. It's probably the best level in Doom Eternal, honestly, and probably the most well designed. However, compared to the Foundry, it definitely has a lot more shortcomings. Honestly, if the level let you collect the 3 keys in any order you wished, and if it gave more freedom to the player in how to approach the level, I would say it would come very close to beating the Foundry. Overall, the scale of the Super Gore Nest and the fact that you can return back to previous areas you've already been to even by the end of the level is a huge plus in my book. The level has everything going for it, the only thing it's missing is player choice. At any rate, I just thought I would touch up on Super Gore Nest there just a little bit so I don't have to make a separate video for that. So for now I'll be signing off. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time with the next game review or discussion. This is Retro Age Fan signing off.